Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. طيب يا إخوان, so we are getting in the home stretch, or we are well into the home stretch of Kitab at-Tawheed. And as the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala, as he closes out the book, he continues to cite these chapters or present these chapters where he is emphasizing and stressing the importance of ta'zeemillah, the importance of exalting Allah, venerating Allah, revering Allah, respecting Allah as He ought to be respected, and talking about things that people might believe, things that people might do, things that people might say that run counter to, contradict, and undermine the reverence and the veneration that every muwahhid, every monotheist should have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for His names, for His attributes, and for Him Himself. And so we're going to look today at a couple of chapters, or maybe 3 chapters. The first one is chapter number 62, which definitely falls in this category. And that chapter, the first chapter, chapter 62, is a chapter in which the Imam said, rahimahullah ta'ala, babu ma ja'a fi kathrat al-halaf. He says the chapter, or what is said regarding frequent oath taking. So basically, as Abdurrahman ibn Nasr al-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, as he said in his commentary, he said that this exalting of Allah and venerating Allah, he said it is ruh at-Tawheed. He said it is the spirit of at-Tawheed, the essence of at-Tawheed. Basically, you can have a body of Tawheed, but you won't have a living Tawheed, a Tawheed which is real, and a Tawheed which achieves the actual purposes that it's supposed to serve, unless that Tawheed is accompanied and infused with ta'zeemillah, venerating Allah appropriately, respecting Him appropriately. And he talks about, or on these chapters, what the Imam is basically telling us is that it's not enough to say or to assume that we venerate Allah, unless we are far away from those things which are the opposite of venerating Allah, showing that we really respect and honor and laud and exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of those acts that shows that we really don't respect Allah as He ought to be respected is when we take His name in vain. So basically, a person will mention Allah's name unnecessarily. He'll mention Allah's name in a way which is, it's basically misusing Allah's name. Or he mentions Allah's name to achieve, or he mentions Allah's name with evil motives, or he mentions Allah's name falsely, basically using Allah's name to convince people of something which isn't true, or he uses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name for a nonsensical purpose, So for example, a person might say, Wallahi, the wall is white. I mean, honestly, what is the purpose of that? What is the use of that? What is the benefit of that? A person is saying it, and it's totally unnecessary. It's useless. And it cheapens the value of Allah's name by saying that, or the value of taking His name. If a person were to say, Wallahi, the wall is white, which is something everyone can see. Or if a person said, for example, Wallahi, this car is a good car. This car will take you to California and back. And he knows that the engine is bad, the transmission is bad, the tires are bad, the shocks are no good. But he says that to convince the person. So he uses Allah's name falsely to convince him of something which is not true. So these are some examples of taking Allah's name in vain. And one example of taking Allah's name in vain is what? Swearing frequently. Swearing just for the sake of what? Swearing, or making swearing something which just, it's part of your vocabulary, part of your vernacular, but not something that you're saying for what? For the purpose for which swearing has been legislated. So, people have this tendency, and specifically in certain cultures, to just say what? Wallahi. And they say wallahi for everything. Yeah? Wallahi, wallahi, for everything, right? Wallahi, I went to the Jamia this morning. I went to the university this morning. Wallahi, I had eggs for breakfast. Wallah? Yeah, wallah, right? Exactly. There's no need for it. And when you do it so much, it shows that what? You don't hold Allah in the proper esteem. Because you wouldn't bring Allah's name if you really thought Allah's name is not something to be mentioned for these trifling things, if you really respected Him. But when we don't respect Allah, then what? Then we have a tendency to what? To use His name repeatedly for nothing, right? For no good reason. طيب. So we have to understand, first of all, we have to be honest with ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the religion of Islam, has legislated, has allowed, has permitted us to swear. But it's permitted us to swear for certain purposes. So for example, one purpose that we swear is ta'kidan lil umur, that sometimes we want to stress and emphasize the importance of something, right? So a person says, Wallahi, tallahi, billahi, I swear by Allah, I swear by Allah, I swear by Allah. Ramadan is a month which is extremely virtuous. Ramadan is a month where people's necks are freed from the hellfire. They want to stress and emphasize that. And so what? They say wallahi. طيب, another reason why we've been allowed to swear is to exalt and magnify the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically, when people swear, they generally swear by things which are what? Which are great. And so you swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show that to you, He's the greatest, right? Person doesn't swear by his father, doesn't swear by his mother, doesn't swear, right, by his house.
Sometimes.
Right? No, I'm not saying that people don't do it. I'm saying a person shouldn't do it, because when he swears by Allah, it shows what? To him, Allah is the greatest, right? And then one last reason that we could add is that sometimes people do it istijlaban lit-tasdiq. Sometimes people will swear by Allah in order to what? To convince people, right? So maybe there's something which people find to be far-fetched, hard to believe. So a person will say what? Wallahi. And when they say wallahi, out of respect for Allah's name, when we hear that, we do what? We believe them. You see that? I got a water bill for $585. No way. Wallahi. You're like, you got a bill for $585. You see that? As soon as he says that, out of respect for Allah, we're going to accept it. You guys see that? As far-fetched and hard to believe as it is, we believe it. Why? Because he invoked the name of Allah. You guys see that? Mumtaz. So for this reason, because Islam only wants us to swear by Allah for these reasons, Islam requires certain things when we swear. It wants us to follow certain guidelines when we swear. So the first one is that one should not swear except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Islam has declared, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our religion has told us that swearing by other than Allah is a form of shirk, an act of idolatry. As the Prophet said in the hadith, Man halafa bi ghayri Allahi faqad kafara aw ashrak. He said, whoever swears by other than Allah has disbelieved or committed idolatry, right? It's a big thing. So the first thing is our religion requires when we swear by who? Allah. Another one is that when we swear, we only swear truthfully. We only swear if we're telling the truth. As the Prophet said in the one hadith, he said, Man halafa billahi falyasduq. Whoever swears by Allah, then let him tell the truth. Let him be truthful. Another thing that Islam requires is that we exemplify or we demonstrate ample respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for His name by minimizing the frequency of what? Of our swearing. Swearing should be something you rarely do. I rarely say wallah. I rarely say it. So when I say it, it has what? It has meaning. It has significance. If a person, generally, you never say wallah. When you say it, it what? It's going to have it's the appropriate effect. You guys see that? But if a person is always saying it, it what? It cheapens it, right? طيب. So how can we, basically what the Imam is telling us by bringing this chapter is that how can you claim to exalt Allah? How can you claim to be what? A muwahid, a monotheist, a person who believes in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ruh, as we said, the spirit, the essence of that Tawheed is ta'zeem Allah, exalting Allah. How can you claim that if you use His name for illegitimate purposes? It can't be the case. And if you really are a muwahid, then understand what follows, which is a clarification that the true muwahid avoids swearing frequently, unnecessarily, or falsely. So now he's going to bring these nusus, these texts, which show us what our religion says about swearing frequently and why we should avoid it. So the first one he brings, rahimahullah ta'ala, is the ayah from Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th chapter, verse 89. He says, وَحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ. He says, and protect your oaths. And basically this verse, this short excerpt of the verse, it basically carries 4 meanings, or it's conveying 4 messages. The first one is don't swear. Avoid swearing. Right? The best thing for you is not to what? Not to swear. Not to say, wallahi. That's the best thing for you. Second thing is, if you do swear, if you do choose to swear, you see some necessity, you see some benefit in swearing, then swear by Allah and swear in His name. Right? And we saw that previous from the hadith, man halafa falyahlif billah. Right? Man kana halifan, the Prophet said, man kana halifan falyahlif billah. Aw liyaskut. He said, whoever's going to swear, let him swear by Allah or what? Or be quiet. Like the third thing the ayah is telling us is, if you swear by Allah, then you need to what? You got to follow through. You have to fulfill your oath, and don't make an oath using Allah's name and then fail to follow through on what you swore by Allah to do. Because again, one of the things we said, one of the benefits of swearing is it's supposed to be something which convinces the listener. So let's say a person says, hey, can I count on you to pick me up? My car's in the shop, and I need you to pick me up from my first job and take me to what? My second job. I can't be late and I can't miss, right? So can I count on you? He said, wallahi, you can count on me. I'll be there. So now you can't say that. You can't say that, and in your mind you're saying, I don't think I'll be able to make it, or I know I won't be able to make it. You guys see that? And then you don't follow through. Not because you didn't really have not because you had an excuse, something happened beyond your control, some unforeseen circumstance. But no, you just chose not to what? Not to follow through. So the verse is also telling us when he says, وَحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ, and protect your oaths. If you say wallahi and you commit yourself to do something, you follow through. And then last but not least, if for some reason you're unable to keep your oath, sometimes it happens, you have every intention to do something, and you swore an oath, wallahi, I will do such and such, and then you don't follow through, then you have to expiate that oath. Expiate the sin associated with what? With failing to follow through. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the first part of this ayah, He says, فَكَفَّارَتُهُ إِطْعَامُ عَشْرَةِ مَسَاكِينَ مِنْ أَوْسَطِ مَا تُطْعِمُونَ أَهْلِيكُمْ أَوْ كِسْوَتُهُمْ أَوْ تَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ 3 أَيَّامٍ ذَلِكَ كَفَّارَةُ أَيْمَانِكُمْ إِذَا حَلَفْتُمْ وَاحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ. So he says, so let's say you make an oath, basically. The ayah basically is talking about people who make an oath. And then they don't what? They don't follow through. Allah says, فَكَفَّارَتُهُ, the expiation for that oath which you didn't complete, that promise to Allah that you broke, is إِطْعَامُ 10 مساكين من أوسط ما تطعمون أهلكم. It is that you feed 10 poor people from the like of which, or the average of which, you feed your own family. You guys see that? So you can't exactly. Exactly. But if you eat a certain thing and then you go get them ramen, that wouldn't be right. From the average of what you feed your own family. Oh, kiswatuhum. Or you what? You clothe. You give clothing to 10 poor people. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ Oh, تَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. Or you free what? You free a slave. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, the person who doesn't have any of the capacity to do any of those things, فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ, then let him fast 3 days. Right? To do what? To expiate. Then he says, ذَلِكَ كَفَّارَةُ أَيْمَانِكُمْ إِذَا حَلَفْتُمْ. He said that is the expiation for oaths when you have sworn them, but failed to what? To follow through. Then he says, وَاحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ. And protect your oaths. Take your oaths seriously. Don't take the name of Allah in vain. طيب. Then he brings, rahimahullah ta'ala, he brings a hadith of Abu Hurairah, Bukhari Muslim, in which he says, الْحَلَفُ مَنْفَقَةٌ لِلسِّلْعَةِ مَمْحَقَةٌ لِلْكَسْبِ. He says that by swearing, the seller may persuade the buyer to purchase the goods, but he will be deprived of Allah's blessing. So what do a lot of people do in marketplaces? Right. And they're looking at it and saying to themselves that I need to sell a certain amount of merchandise to stay out of the red. I need to sell a certain amount of merchandise to what? To be able to achieve certain financial goals I have. And that desperation, that feeling of desperation, that feeling of being what? In that vice, and that fear of that consistent uncertainty. You know what I mean? What's going to happen today? May put a person, when they have somebody in front of them, I can't let this person leave without what? Without making a sale. And that might cause a person to do what? To invoke Allah's name and use it in vain. Wallahi, man, this is good. Wallahi, you won't regret it. Wallahi, the guy next door, his prices are nowhere near as good as mine. His products aren't as good as mine. Wallahi. You guys see that? So the Prophet says, Al-halifu manfaqatun lis-sil'a. Oftentimes, saying wallahi will get the person to buy. If they're pious, if they're God-fearing, it will get the person to buy. You guys see that? But it's mamhaqatun lil-kasb. But there will be no blessing in what? In what you sold. There will be no blessing in what? In those earnings. Right? Because you use Allah like what? As we're going to see in the next hadith, Baba'a. You use Allah like what? Like a coin. Like a pawn, like a chess piece. You guys see that? And that isn't the sign of somebody who what? Who reveres Allah. You guys see that? طيب. So what the hadith is teaching us is what? We shouldn't swear frequently, and we shouldn't swear when we're conducting transactions, right? Business transactions. Ahsant. Then he brings the hadith of Salman, in which the Prophet said, ثلاثة لا يكلمهم الله ولا يزكيهم ولهم عذاب أليم. He says, أشيمت زان وعائل مستكبر ورجل جعل الله بضاعته لا يشتري إلا بيمينه ولا يبيع إلا بيمينه. So in this hadith, the shahid, he says, there are 3 types of people whom Allah will not speak to, and neither will He bless them, and for them is a severe torment. Right there, that opening statement tells you that whatever follows is a major sin. You guys see that? Then he says, they are a graying adulterer, an arrogant beggar, and the one who has made Allah as his merchandise. How did he do that? He does not purchase except by swearing by Allah, nor does he sell except by swearing by Allah. You guys see that? In order to buy and sell, again, using Allah what? Like a pawn, okay? And this shows, so basically Allah's name is something to be used at my discretion for what? For my purposes, for my worldly, material purposes. You guys see that? And so this also shows a person doesn't have the required exaltation of Allah in Allah's name, because he wouldn't use Allah's name. He wouldn't use Allah for this illegitimate purpose. He wouldn't use Allah's name or misuse Allah's name for the wrong purpose, if you will. Okay? Then he brings the hadith of Imran and Ibn Mas'ud, which are 2 versions of the same hadith. And so we'll read both of those in English for the sake of time. He says, the first one, he says, the best of my ummah, my nation, is my generation. Then those who immediately follow them, then those who immediately follow them. So basically the companions of Muhammad, the tabi'een, the 2nd generation, and atba' tabi'een, the 3rd generation. That's what the Prophet is talking about. And he's referring to them in this hadith as the gold standard. He's saying they're the gold standard as it relates to what? To Islam. They're the gold standard as it relates to what? Al-Fahm, understanding Islam and practicing it. They are what? They are the role models for others. They are the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Then he says, then there will come a generation. So after those 3 generations, things will begin to what? Devolve. Right? And the ummah will begin to regress and go in the wrong direction. And he says there will come a generation who will be ready to witness without being requested to do so. That's what and that's the shahid. There'll be the people who will hasten to do what? To give witness, hasten to what? To say when they haven't been asked to say anything, to give witness. And then he says, and they will take oaths for vowing but never fulfill them. And obesity will be seen in them. And then he mentions that means that they're preoccupied with acquiring worldly ease. We'll talk about that in more detail shortly. And then he mentions the version of Ibn Mas'ud in which he said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ يَجِيءُ قَوْمٌ تَسْبِقُ الشَّهَادَةُ أَحَدِهِمْ يَمِينَهُ وَيَمِينُهُ شَهَادَةً. He says, the best of mankind is my generation, then those who come after them and those who follow them immediately. And then he says, thereafter will come a people whose witness will go ahead of their oaths and their oaths will go ahead of their witness. Meaning they're what? Kathir al-halif. They'll be the people who what? They're always saying what? Wallahi, wallahi, wallahi. And he's mentioning this after mentioning the cream of the crop as if to say they're not the cream of the crop. That they have these uyub, they have these faults and they have these shortcomings and they have these failings and foibles that make them what? Blameworthy. Make them less than what? Than what is expected or preferred. And one of those qualities that they have is that they take Allah's name in vain. They take Allah's name in vain. And then he mentioned another quality. He said, وَيَظْهَرُ فِيهِمْ السِّمَنُ. He says basically obesity will be common amongst them. Now obviously the Prophet ﷺ is not saying somehow, some way that obesity beyond a person's control, obesity that they cannot what? Manage, obesity that is related to some type of condition that they have, that somehow makes them bad or blameworthy. But what the Prophet is actually talking about, as the translator attempted to clarify, is being preoccupied with material pursuits and what? And consumption. And one of the clearest indications of what? Of a person being preoccupied with consumption is what? Is being overweight. But the consumption is not necessarily limited to what? To food. It's a person who's preoccupied with consumption of what? Of goods and services, clothes and objects, phones, watches, shoes. Preoccupied with what? Consumption. With buying things and having more and more what? Of material things. He says this is something which will become common amongst what? And it's something that he says is blameworthy. Doesn't mean a person can't have nice things. We know this because the Prophet ﷺ was asked about a person who likes to wear nice clothes and nice shoes. And he said, Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbu al-jamal. He said, Allah is beautiful and he loves that you beautify yourselves. But when a person is what? Is overly preoccupied, wakes up and goes to sleep, preoccupied with what? With consumption, with having and owning and possessing and buying and consuming. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was talking about when he said, وَيَظْهَرُ فِيهِمْ السِّمَنُ. طيب, last but not least, he mentions the athar of Ibrahim al-Nakha'i rahimahullah ta'ala. And in that athar he says, he says, in our childhood, we were beaten by our elders to stand firm on witness and covenant. So basically, he actually said, كانوا يضربوننا على الشهادة والعهد ونحن صغار. That's actually what he actually said. And when he said kanu, they used to, he's talking about Ashab Ibn Mas'ud. He's talking about the pupils of Ibn Mas'ud. So Ibn Mas'ud, this great companion of the Prophet Muhammad, he used to teach people. He had students. And those students had kids. And they also had what? Students. So those students of Ibn Mas'ud, they would do what? They would physically chastise their children if they what? If they were, right, if they were frequently given to what? Swearing and taking Allah's name in vain. They took it what? Very seriously. Now bear in mind what we just said and what the Prophet just taught us. He taught us that these people, the early Muslims, are the gold standard and they're our role models. And you see that they took this very what? Very seriously. And they would go so far as to physically chastise their children for violating this principle. And so what does that teach us? It teaches a few things. One, it teaches us that as Muslim parents, we need to be teaching our kids. We need to be teaching our kids, and they are our trust. We're responsible for them. As Ibn al-Qayyim, he said he said in one of his works, he said, as-Saafiyyu amanatun inda waliday. He said, a child is a trust to his parents. Something that, and a trust basically means it's something given to you that you haven't earned, and something that you're expected to ultimately give back, and give it back in the same or better condition than you found it. You see that? That's what he's saying. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, he says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. He says, protect yourselves and your families, your children, from a fire whose fuel is men and stones. That there's some work you have to put in, and something you're expected to what? To do. They were given to you as Muslims. Return them to Allah as Muslims. Or what? Or mu'mineen, believers. Or muhsineen. Or what? The people who achieve spiritual excellence. You guys see that? Don't give them back to Allah as what? Kuffar. Because that wouldn't be fulfilling the trust. You guys see that? And the Prophet said in the hadith, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ رَعِيَّتِهِ. He said, all of you are shepherds. And each one of you is going to be asked, you're going to be held accountable for what? For your flock. You guys see that? And so that's the first thing we learn, is that we need to be teaching our kids. And you see, they put in the work to teach their kids. And sometimes that work entailed, because for many of us, we love our kids. And we think loving them means spoiling them. Always telling them yes. Never punishing them, never scolding them, never telling them off. No, that's not. Sometimes you have to what? You have to do that for their own sake, for their own good. Another thing it teaches us is that we need to teach them those things that constitute errors. Make them aware that, hey, this is something what? This is something wrong. We need to make them aware. We can't just let them do things that are wrong. And those things that are wrong doesn't mean the things that are haram, just outright haram. Like we tell them, don't drink alcohol, right? Don't fornicate, don't commit adultery. No, even things that are related to character. Because I'm going to ask you honestly, if a person was in the habit of saying, wallahi, wallahi, would that make him a disbeliever? No. Would that be as bad as going to a bar and getting drunk? No. It's not the biggest thing, but it's what? It's something. It's something. And we also have to understand that a lot of times people don't do the big things before doing what? The small things. There's steps to it. And so whenever we see our child deviating from the exalted standard of character, we should what? We should tell them, we should check them, we should tell them, hey, this undermines at-Tawheed. This undermines the character, the exalted standard of character. It's not the way a believer is supposed to behave. And we don't say, well, at least they pray, which is what a lot of parents do. Yeah, a person. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, if we recognize that it's wrong, then we should correct their behavior. And look what they did. They wouldn't just say, hey, you really shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes they would physically chastise them. Okay? Another thing it teaches is that kids develop the characteristics and they develop the qualities and the spirituality that they are taught. That there's a reason why we basically you're training your child, you're training them. And as the Prophet said in the hadith, knowledge is something which people learn. It's not something they inherit. It's not something they get by osmosis. He said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. He said, knowledge is something you learn. It's not something you get by osmosis. These kids are not born. They're not born knowing Islam. As Allah says, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. They don't inherit Islam from us. That let's say we are good. And we think, well, I'm good. And they had my DNA. I gave birth to them, right? They're from my loins. So therefore they're going to what? Inherit my goodness. No, we have to teach them the goodness. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. Knowledge is by what? By teaching. If I haven't taught, if I haven't put in the work, I can't expect what? The results to be good. I remember one time I visited a masjid for like this mini conference, and we were talking about like teaching kids or something like that. And one of the people asked a question, said something to the effect of, can't we just put our trust in Allah because whatever the kid is going to turn out to be has already been decreed by Allah? And there's a number of problems with saying that. And one of them that's related to what we're saying is that, let's just say for the sake of argument that you just left them wandering, groping in the darkness to see if they could find their own way. And somehow, some way, they did find their way. They found their way to guidance. They found their way to spiritual success. They found their way to salvation. Would you get any credit for that? No. Would you get any reward for that? And so you're depriving yourself of what? Of that reward. And that should be enough incentive for us. Not, let alone the fact that why would you want your child to be groping in the darkness and ultimately what? Go the wrong way. And be held what? Accountable, as the Prophet said, kullukum ra'in. All of you are shepherds and you're going to be asked about your flock. It's 8:38. Let's try to do maybe one more. I was hoping to do 3 chapters, but I don't want to keep you guys too late. Let's look at the next chapter, with chapter number 63. And that is Babu ma ja'a fi dhimmatillah wa dhimmati nabiyyihi. What is said regarding giving the guarantee of Allah and that of His Prophet. So here's another chapter. Again, as the Imam closes it out, it's like I've talked to you about the essentials of at-Tawheed. I've talked to you about what? The body of at-Tawheed. And now I want to stress and emphasize on the spirit of at-Tawheed, ta'zim-illah, exalting Allah, venerating Allah, and that which undermines that. And he mentions this chapter in which he talks about the guarantee of Allah, or dhimmatillah. And this word dhimma, it could be translated as a guarantee or a promise of safety or protection, or a pact and firm commitment to certain terms, right? So basically, a dhimma is you saying, let's say, if you gave me dhimma, you will be saying to me, I'll give you a guarantee. I make a pact with you, and these are the terms of it. Or I give you this covenant of safety and protection. That's basically what a dhimma it means. And the Imam is stressing how that relates, if you give dhimma to Allah, the guarantee of Allah, how that relates to what? To the duty that we have as muwahhideen to revere Allah and to venerate Him, as we've been saying. And that we said, that necessitates that you avoid certain beliefs, certain statements, certain actions that undermine that. And that avoiding those beliefs and statements that undermine that is what? It's part and parcel of Tawheed. You can't think, if I just have the body with no spirit, I'm good to go. No, your Tawheed isn't complete until what? Until you fill it with what? This veneration of Allah. Then he's saying that it can't be properly achieved without what? Without avoiding the things that violate it. And one of those things that violates it is giving someone Allah's dhimma. Giving Allah someone Allah's dhimma. Giving Allah somebody's his guarantee. Because let's say, for example, that I call myself representing you. Right? And I go to somebody else and I say, yeah, so basically, you want to buy the property or not? Yeah, I want to buy the property, but I'm concerned about the furnace. You know, the furnace is a little old, a little aged, and I'm just concerned that if it breaks down within the first 3 years, will the owner cover it? Will he cover its repair, its replacement? And I say, yeah, I guarantee he'll do that. And I say it on your behalf, right? Without your consent. And then ultimately it does break down. And the person comes back to you. And they're like, yeah, you're going to fix this furnace for me, right? And you didn't agree to that. You didn't give me that consent to say that. And you sold them the house like what? I'm selling to you as is. You do your inspection. You do whatever you want to do. And if it's not in the contract, then it's on you. That's how you understood it. So when that person comes and says, so you got this furnace, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
I never agreed to that.
I never, and you're not going to, and you're not going to feel, you're not going to feel obligated to fulfill that term, are you? Now, that person who I told on your behalf that this is what you were going to do, I gave him your pact, I gave him your guarantee. He's going to feel a certain type of way, isn't he? Isn't he?
He should.
Yeah, he's going to feel a certain type of way. And when he feels a certain type of way, he has every right to feel a certain type of way and he's going to feel a certain type of way about who? About you. Even though it's what? You. It's me that did that. It's me that said that and gave that guarantee. Now think about it if I gave Allah's guarantee. Without Allah's consent, I speak on Allah's behalf and I say, I guarantee that this will happen. This will be the pact. These will be the terms. I guarantee it on Allah's behalf. I give you dhimmat Allah. And then it turns out that I legally, Islamically, that's not permissible. Allah doesn't want it to be like that. So now what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to do what I said or do what Allah said? I'm going to have to do what Allah said. So when I do what Allah said means I'm not going to follow through on the terms that I gave you. And now you're going to feel a certain way about who? Allah, because you gave me Allah's pact. So what just happened there? First of all, I showed a lack of proper respect for Allah's what? For Allah's name and for His dhimmah. Because if I really respected Allah's name, then I wouldn't give His guarantee, not knowing for certain if I could follow through on that. I don't want to speak on Allah's behalf and then not follow through. At the same time, I caused you to think poorly of Allah. You guys see that? Because you gave me Allah's pact. Let's say I'm dealing with a Christian or a Jew or a non-Muslim. And I say, I give you Allah's pact and I don't follow through. He says, oh, so your Lord is just, he's treacherous. No, my Lord isn't treacherous, but I misspoke. But they're not going to look at me. They're going to look at who? Allah. And so basically because of this, we've been instructed not to give Allah's what? Not to give Allah's guarantee. Never to give Allah's guarantee. But rather to give what? Our guarantee. Because if I don't follow through on what I guaranteed or the pact that I give you or the terms that I give you, then you're going to look at me and you're going to view me poorly. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be what? Will be spared that deprecation. And that's how it should be. If I really, really respect Allah, I don't want you to look at Allah poorly. And I don't want to be the cause of you looking at Allah poorly. You guys see that? Mumtaz. So this is what the Shaykh means when he brings this chapter, Babu ma ja'a fi dhimmatillah wa dhimmati nabiyyihi, the protection of Allah's covenant and the protection of His Prophet's covenant. So he starts out with the verse from Surah An-Nahl, which is the 16th chapter, verse number 91, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَوْفُوا بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ إِذَا عَهَدْتُمْ وَلَا تَنْقُضُوا الْأَيْمَانَ بَعْدَ تَوْكِيدِهَا. And fulfill the covenant of Allah, the bay'ah, the pledge of allegiance to Islam, when you have covenanted. And break not the oaths after you have confirmed them. So what does Allah teach us in this verse? That when we swear by Allah or speak on His behalf, I give you what? Allah's covenant. I give you His guarantee to uphold the terms of the covenant. And it is from exalting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and venerating Him appropriately that we don't give what? We don't go back on our word. That if we give our word, we don't go back on it. But if we give Allah's pact and we give His covenant and we really don't know really what it's going to be, and then we come to find out that it can't be the way that we've agreed or we've asserted, then now we have to go back on our word. Allah is saying, don't put yourself in that position. You guys see that? From by that, he brings the hadith, it's a long one, the hadith of Buraidah. And so just to save time, we'll look at it in English and then we'll comment on it and then we'll break out, inshallah ta'ala. So he says, whenever Allah's messenger deputed anyone as a leader of an army or a troop or an expedition, he admonished him to fear Allah and be good to the Muslims that are with him. Be good to the Muslims in the army, under his charge, his authority. He used to say, Ughzu Bismillah. started fighting the war in the name of Allah. قاتلوا في سبيل الله. Fight in the cause of Allah. قاتلوا من كفر بالله. And fight those who disbelieve in Allah. You fight and do not take unduly from the spoils of war, nor break any treaty, nor mutilate the dead bodies, nor kill the children. This first part, he's telling him the rules of war. Yeah. And you guys know they have something called, the Geneva Convention and the rules that govern war, right? And a lot of that is taken from what? From what the Prophet said. That he didn't tell his people, go and fight and do whatever, do whatever you want, do whatever it takes, and there's no rules, right? How they say it, no holds barred, right? Everything goes. No, he told them, hey, fight in the name of Allah, and what? And follow these guidelines. Don't transgress these boundaries, right? We're fighting our enemy, but there's certain things we won't do. There's certain lines we won't cross. Then after that, he said, when you meet your enemies who are polytheists, invite them to 3 alternatives. If they respond to any of these positively, accept them at their words and do not continue the war anymore. Shows you Islam, al-jihad muradun li ghayri hilali dhatihi. It shows you that in Islam we fight. We don't fight for the sake of fighting. We don't fight to spill blood. We're not marauders. We're not raiders. We're fighting for what? A specific purpose. And our ultimate goal is for kalimatullah to be al-ulya, for kalimatullah to be what? Uppermost, for people to be free to practice Islam and to spread Islam. And if that is the case, then we stop what? Fighting. And we prefer peace to war. Unlike some people in their mind, they think that jihad is for the sake of jihad. That Muslims just need to be fighting for the sake of fighting. Even if their enemies have requested peace, sought peace, and want to live and coexist with them peacefully, no, we should fight them anyway. Even if our enemies are much stronger than us and basically fighting them is suicide, we should what? Fight them anyway. That wasn't the way of the Prophet. You see that? To the point that you're going to see in the alternatives, he says, if they give jizya, don't fight them. If Islam wanted us to fight just for the sake of fighting, we would fight them even if they what? Gave us jizya. So he says, if they respond to any of these positively, accept them at their words and not continue the war anymore. Invite them to accept Islam. If they agree to accept Islam, ask them to leave their homes and migrate to the lands of the Muhajirin. Tell them that thereafter their migration, they shall be entitled to get all the privileges and obligations of the Muhajirin. If they refuse to migrate, then make it clear that they will have the status of Bedouin Muslims and shall be subjected to the commands of Allah like other Muslims, but they shall not get any share of the spoils of war or returns of war unless they fight with the Muslims or on the Muslim side. If they do not confess Islam, propose jizya. Let them pay a tax of protection. And if they comply with that, then restrain your hands from them. But if they refuse to pay jizya, then seek Allah's help and fight them. Ista'inu Allah wa qatiluhum. Right? Then he says, when you lay siege to a fort, and then this is the shahid. This is the pertinent part. He says, when you lay siege to a fort and the besieged appeal to you for protection in the name of Allah, they ask you for Allah's guarantee and that of His Prophet. Do not offer them the guarantee of Allah and His Prophet, but give them your what? Your guarantee and the guarantee of your comrades. Hey, this is me. This is my army. I'm speaking on our own behalf. This is how it's going to be. These are terms of what? Terms of surrender. Then he says, for it is a lesser sin that the security provided by you and your companions is disregarded than the security granted to them in the name of Allah and His Prophet. Then he says, when you besiege a fort and the besieged want you to let them out in accordance with Allah's command, they want to do what? They want to negotiate the terms of surrender. And if we surrender, these are the terms. Then he says, do not let them out in accordance with your what? So basically the translation is not that great. So basically, do not let them out on your terms. And do not say that the judgment you pass is Allah's judgment. It's what? It's your judgment. Do so on your own behalf and your own terms. For you do not know whether or not you will be able to ascertain and achieve Allah's terms regarding them or not. And so basically, the message is this, is that one thing that the Muslim does not do is he does not speak on Allah's behalf and say, this is Allah's judgment, because it might not be Allah's judgment. And he has so much respect for Allah that he doesn't want to speak on Allah's behalf erroneously. And then when everything gets flushed out, it turns out that what he said was representative of Allah was not really representative. And so then he did what? He himself showed disrespect to Allah because he misspoke on Allah's behalf. And if you really venerate Allah, you what? You'll be very careful what words you choose and then what? Attribute it to Allah. Secondly, he painted a poor picture of Allah and caused someone to have a poor opinion of Allah because of something he said and attached to what? Attached to Allah's name. Now, if we want to apply this in a more practical sense, it's like a person giving somebody dawah and telling them that Islam is like this. Because when you say Islam is like this, you're saying what? This is Allah's judgment. This is Allah's deen. And a person speaks in a way that he thinks will appeal to the listener. And people do this all the time. They speak about Islam to someone who seems really genuinely interested in it. And they start telling them things that they think will what? Will increase that interest. Maybe even make them what? Accept Islam. But they're telling them things that they really don't know for certain. Right? So the person might ask him, he says, so in your religion, if you have like certain like behaviors, certain things that you do that go against the religion, and you're not able to really like give it up, or you just don't feel like you don't feel it's wrong. You don't feel it's wrong, even if you don't do it, but in your heart of hearts, you don't feel it's wrong. So like in our time, people might incline toward alternative lifestyles, right? And you're talking to somebody like that who's really interested in Islam, but they have these ideas about love and relationships and who can be in relationships with each other. And in their mind, love is love and anyone can be in a relationship with anyone. That's what's in their mind. And they themselves may actually what? Engage in these behavior and say, you know what, I think I realize that in your religion, you can't do these things. But I don't believe that they're wrong. I won't do it, but I don't believe it's wrong. Is that okay? And the person's like, yeah, as long as you don't do it, that's what matters. But that's not true. In fact, the person who does it believing it's wrong is better than the one who doesn't do it believing it's what? It's right. The one who doesn't believe in it's wrong is a sinner. The one who doesn't do it believing it's right is a disbeliever. Y'all see that? But the person says, yeah, come on, be a Muslim. Yeah, sure. Right? Right? And he says it on behalf of who? Allah. You guys see that? And so this is a more practical example for us because obviously we're not at war. We're not giving Allah's guarantee as terms of surrender. But people do what? They do have a tendency to speak on Allah's behalf and speak in Allah's name, to attach something that they believe, something they think is good at that moment, good for their purposes, to achieve their objectives and attach to Allah. We can't do that if we really respect Allah. It also shows a certain level of disrespect because it's like you believe you can guide the person. You can guide them independent of Allah. No. Give them the message and it's up to Allah to what? To guide. Don't say, I got to do what I got to do. I got to manipulate. I got to twist. I got to contort the religion to get them to accept it. Don't say that. Because it shows that what? I don't have really what? The respect that Allah knows what he's doing. He knows who to guide, who to bring to Islam, when and how. Maybe it's not this person's time today. Because they got to what? They got to work through this. But I'm trying to do what? I'm trying to force God's hand. Do I have respect for God, for Allah? Am I venerating him the way I'm supposed to? No. I'm going to give you the message. This is it. Take it or leave it. Right? I'm not going to sugarcoat the message and give it to you in a way that I think you'll accept it. But the message that I give you ends up not being what? Not being Islam. And so you're following a religion that's not Islam, although you have convinced yourself you're a Muslim and I'm the one who's at fault there. I'm the reason for your misguidance. although I want it to be the reason for your guidance. So this is a more practical example. And with that, we'll bring today's session to a close. Any questions, comments, or critiques before we close out? Going once? Going twice?
I can tell you something.
As you can tell me,
I can say something.
Habib has a question.
Okay.
I have a comment that's not
Hey.
specific to this here.
Okay, go ahead. Tfaddal, Sheikh.
I just wanted to kind of put a reminder out there that there are like 5 more classes until Ramadan. Yeah.
Wow.
And the last 2 of those classes is after the time change.
Okay.
So I don't know. I guess we'll probably do it between Maghrib and Isha because Isha's going to be close to 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we don't want that. We definitely don't want that.
The last 2 classes, either way.
We don't want that.
I was wondering when y'all was gonna change it. Every time before I leave the house, I check the app.
Yeah, and we did this year for whatever reason. The previous years we did try to look ahead and be very, very on point with the time changes.
March 6th.
This year we just have not. Yeah,
So there'll be 2 classes. There'll be 2 Mondays
before
March 6th and
the 22nd or 23rd when it starts. Okay. So right now, Maghrib is about 6:06, something like that.
Yeah, and Isha is 7:45.
And what I didn't want to do, because Habib had actually suggested that we maybe look at Maghrib right now, I just wanted to be more closer to 6:30 before we made that move.
We can make it 6:30.
So that's what I was trying to. What I was trying to do was wait till Maghrib was more like about 6:30.
Oh, okay.
But so maybe we need to just relook at that, I guess, because we want to get you out earlier and not get you out late. It's 9 o'clock now.
Take a week. Think about it.
Yeah. So maybe after next week we could do Maghrib. Maybe that's what we'll
I
do.
mean, right now, I guess Maghrib is probably finishing about 6:20.
Yeah.
So that's still an hour and almost an hour and a half before
Before the Isha, which is a lot of time too.
Yeah.
Now we'll be.
The phone for Isha is delayed like a half an hour.
So what we could potentially do is we could say 6:30 to 7:30, which means if you want to come for Maghrib and just sit and wait, that's fine. And otherwise, we'll be starting at 6:30 and go until 7:30. How does that sound to everybody?
You have to wait until Isha hits 7:30. Salat al-Isha, what time?
About 7:40.
Yeah, no, the Iqamah is earlier, but they don't.
They don't generally play it.
The adhan is earlier, but the Iqamah is not till 7:45.
Right. So if you guys want to do that, we could start that as early as next week, if you guys are cool with that. So 6:30, and we go to Isha, which is about an hour.
We come. You call it. We'll show it.
Y'all feeling 6:30? All right, let's do that then. From now on, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go 6:30 start next week. We'll go between Maghrib and Isha, and then get you guys out of here before 8.
And then we discontinue Ramadan.
Yeah, most likely we won't do anything in Ramadan, and maybe what we'll do, depending on how you guys are feeling, is that we're gonna probably wrap this up. I may be able to summarize the next 4 chapters or 3 chapters, wrap it up next week, and then we'd have maybe like 4 weeks of just maybe looking at some Siyam, some fast and stuff, So we'll do that as well. So 6:30 next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Hada wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala Nabi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum.